It is the time that we have been waiting for since literally last November. It is October again, and I am prepared. I am ready. I have an arsenal of spooky gothic books to match the October mood, and of course, I want to talk about them. I have a pretty good mixed stack here, 9 books, mostly fiction, few non-fiction, but let's talk about fiction first. The first one I have here is Shirley Jackson's We Have Always Lived in the Castle. And I love this Penguin Classics Deluxe Edition. Just look at the details. Shirley Jackson was a horror mystery writer. This was the final book that she wrote, and it was published in 1962. And I believe we follow an 18-year-old girl who's living with her sister and her uncle on an estate 6 years after the rest of her family was taken out by some mysterious tragedy. But the mystery starts to unfold when a cousin visits and kind of intrudes on their isolation. And I have heard that this is weird, bizarre, and I'm excited to be unsettled. Okay, the next one is a more recent novel published a few years ago. It's The Latinist by Prins. It's set on the University of Oxford campus in the classics department, where Tessa may have just realized that her professor is trying to sabotage her, and it might be because he wants to keep her all to himself. And meanwhile, Tessa has perhaps just made this important discovery about an ancient Latin poet that could make her as an academic. Apparently, this is based on the ancient Greek myth of Daphne and Apollo, which is a story about crazy desire and obsession and unrequited love. So all the makings of a classic juicy drama. And on the front cover, the blurb says that this is a superb literary suspense novel reminiscent of The Secret History, which we love. I am in. Okay, the third book, I literally say I'm gonna read it every year, but this is really the year that I finally get around to reading Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I watched the movie adaptation when it came out a couple of years ago, so I kind of already know the story, but I think for me this is going to be about mood, the mood of the setting especially. Setting's important. Even the first line is, "Last night I dreamt I went to Manderley again." So that is going to be a big theme, like the haunting of this place, haunted people. If you don't already know, it's about a young bride who moves in with her husband into his mansion, Manderley, and she starts to feel the eerie presence of his previous wife, Rebecca. The presence that Rebecca exerts on the home and on the new Mrs. De Winter through her absence, which is a very spooky concept in and of itself, the presence of absence. And Mark Fisher talks about this in his book, The Weird and the Eerie, but I won't get into that right now. This next one I have also been meaning to read for years, and everyone else has already read it but me. That is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. So you probably already know what it's about, but in case you don't, it is about Dorian Gray, who's obsessed with his own youth and beauty after it's captured in a portrait that has just been painted of him. And he's disturbed that he himself will age while his portrait stays beautiful forever. So he wishes that the reverse would come true, that his portrait would age while he himself stays beautiful forever. And then things go wrong. It's like the setup of some epic fable or parable. Again, I think for me this is going to be about the setting, which is supposed to be pretty moody. There's a supernatural element. It's giving Victorian era Gothic Black Mirror episode. Yeah. I also want to read this Victorian era novel, although this one is set in late 19th century New York City, and I think there is a movie or TV show adaptation of this one as well. It's The Alienist by Caleb Carr. It's about these serial murders that are taking place in the poor tenement areas of New York City, and the secret task force that is assembled to catch the guy using the cutting-edge but controversial methods based on early psychological theories, which at that time were not well accepted yet. And I think there's some real historical basis to this story, and as someone who is interested in psychology and dark and abnormal psychology, I'm hoping to learn more about the history of that through this book. Plus, gritty New York City, true crime, yes please. Okay, just one more book of fiction, and this one I actually know the least about. I actually based this pick on the cover and the title alone. Oops! But it is The Asylum by Patrick McGrath. This one should also be psychologically interesting because, it takes place in an asylum, aka a mental hospital. The synopsis says it's about the beautiful Stella, who moves to an asylum when her husband, who's a psychologist, takes a position there, and she falls under the spell of one of the patients there, who is a sculptor who murdered his wife. And it says that it is hair-raising, heartbreaking, and hypnotically engrossing. I actually like the first little bit here, so I'm just gonna read from the first paragraph. It says, "The catastrophic love affair characterized by sexual obsession has been a professional interest of mine for many years now. Such relationships vary widely in duration and intensity, but tend to pass through the same stages: recognition, identification, assignation, structure, complication, and so on. Stella Raphael's story is one of the saddest I know. A deeply frustrated woman, she suffered the predictable consequences of a long denial, collapsing in the face of sudden, overwhelming temptation. And she was a romantic." So that's it for all the novels I want to read, but I found some good October nonfiction too. So I always try to be working on some book of poetry, and I thought this month I would go for the poems of Charlotte Brontë, one of the OG Gothic literary sisters. Don't know if I'll read this back to front. I usually like to skip around in my poetry. Why is this so heavy? I feel like I'm going to break my wrist just from holding this. It's printed on lead or something. But it does smell old and clean and booky, which is nice. What? Inside Fwab says, "Charlotte emerges as a poet of uneven quality, perhaps the worst poet of her talented family. Yet some of the poems were not intended for publication, and it is unfair to judge her poetic art from her early ramblings." Damn. Well, now I don't know what to think, but honestly I'm a little more intrigued. Also, if anyone ever tried to publish the poems that I have written in my notes app, they would be saying far worse. Then I want to read what might be a very morbid, but I think probably pretty poignant book about working with dead bodies. It is Smoke Gets in Your Eyes by Doughty. You might already know, but Caitlin has a fantastic YouTube channel where she talks about the realities of working with corpses for a living. She's a mortician, but she also has a degree in medieval history, so she does these great episodes about the history of bizarre deaths. Very macabre. I actually go to her to confront my death anxiety, which at times in my life has been so overwhelming and all-consuming. But I have found that sometimes facing the topic head-on can help, especially the way that Caitlin talks about it, which is both matter-of-fact and respectful. And like the subtitle of her book, Other Lessons from the Crematory, I think she's able to talk about death in the way that actually sheds light on life. Anyway, this is her memoir. I've watched her for so long. I'm excited to actually dive into her personal experiences and beginnings. Okay, this last one is a little bit of a quirky pick, but it's on a subject that I am always interested in. And I think it's especially perfect for October because it's a little bit witchy. I am talking about the moon. I have this handy little field guide to the moon. Its subtitle is Awe and Exploration Across Human History. It doesn't just cover like the phases of the moon or the geography of the surface of the moon, although I'm very interested in those things too. My family and I like to go up to our balcony in the evenings and watch the sunset and then watch the stars and the moon come out. So I think this would be really fun to look through together. And I think that the Monday following this video is supposed to be a full moon. Anyway, it's also about humanity's relationship to the moon, like in art and in religion. And of course it talks about the lunar missions, and there are interviews with artists and scientists about their feelings about the moon. I love this little book, and I've only ever kind of flipped through it. And so I'm actually excited to read it cover to cover.
Well, look who came to join us.
Well, that is it for the books I want to read this month. I am anticipating a lot of reading by candlelight and getting cozy. We finally just got our fireplace up and running for the first time this season a few days ago, so stay tuned and we can camp out there and read our books together. It'll be the best. And tell me what you are reading. I want to know. I will see y'all later. Bye!